Sarah glanced at the invitation in her hand, a flicker of excitement stirring in her chest. It was an unexpected message from her friend Lisa, inviting her to a lavish party. She hesitated, thinking of Tom, her husband, who was away on yet another business trip. Their marriage had been strained, the constant loneliness gnawing at her. With a sigh, she decided to go. Maybe a night out was just what she needed to escape the monotony of her neglected life. The party was in full swing when Sarah arrived, the opulence of the surroundings making her feel out of place. She hovered near the entrance, scanning the room filled with glamorous guests. Just as she considered leaving, a man approached her, his presence immediately captivating. "I'm Jack," he said, his smile disarming. They exchanged pleasantries, and soon, their conversation turned flirtatious. Sarah felt a spark she hadn't felt in years, a thrilling rush of something she had long forgotten. Jack introduced her to his friend, Mark, whose charisma was equally intoxicating. The three of them found a corner of the room to themselves, sharing drinks and laughter. The chemistry between them was undeniable, and Sarah felt herself drawn to their magnetic personalities. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so alive. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew more intimate. Jack and Mark's attentions towards Sarah became more overt, their touches lingering. She felt a thrilling mixture of excitement and apprehension, her heart pounding in her chest. Their playful banter and seductive glances made her feel desired in a way that Tom hadn't in years. The trio moved to a quieter area of the party, away from prying eyes. Jack's hand rested lightly on her waist, while Mark's fingers brushed against her arm. Their touches became more suggestive, and Sarah's inhibitions began to wane under their seductive influence. She could feel the intoxicating mix of alcohol and desire coursing through her veins. Overwhelmed by the attention and the electric atmosphere, Sarah allowed herself to be led to a private room. The door closed behind them, sealing her fate. Her breath quickened with anticipation, a whirlwind of exhilaration and guilt swirling inside her. In the privacy of the room, Jack and Mark's advances became more intense. Their hands explored her body with a fervor that left her breathless. Caught between the thrill of the moment and the nagging voice of conscience, Sarah surrendered to their passionate touches. She felt herself slipping into a haze of ecstasy, the weight of her lonely nights melting away in the heat of their embrace. The world outside the room ceased to exist as Sarah lost herself in the intensity of their shared desire. Each touch, each kiss, drove her further into a state of blissful abandon. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly alive, her body and soul ignited by a fire she thought had long been extinguished. But as the night deepened and the shadows grew longer, a faint, nagging dread began to creep into her mind. Sarah woke up in her own bed, the sunlight streaming through the curtains. Her body ached pleasantly from the previous night's encounter, but her mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions. Shame mingled with a lingering euphoria, and she quickly decided that she would keep the night's events a secret. The thought of Tom finding out was too terrifying to contemplate. She told herself it was a one-time lapse in judgment, a fleeting escape from her neglected life. Throughout the day, Sarah's thoughts kept drifting back to Jack and Mark. She couldn't shake the memory of their touches, the way they made her feel so desired. Despite her best efforts to focus on her usual routine, she found herself checking her phone obsessively, hoping for a message from either of them. When her phone finally buzzed, her heart skipped a beat. It was a text from Jack, suggesting they meet up again. Sarah's pulse quickened as she read his words. Torn between guilt and a deep-seated desire, she rationalized that it could be one more time, just to satisfy her curiosity. She agreed to meet him, the thrill of anticipation coursing through her veins. They met at a discreet cafe, where the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Their conversation was casual, but the undercurrent of their shared secret was palpable. It didn't take long before they decided to go somewhere private. They moved to a secluded hotel room, where their passion ignited once more. Sarah felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, her dissatisfaction with her marriage pushed to the back of her mind. Not long after, Mark contacted Sarah separately. He suggested a private rendezvous, and Sarah, emboldened by her encounter with Jack, agreed. They met in another discreet location, where Mark's touch reignited the same fire within her. She found herself caught in a whirlwind of desire and secrecy, the boundaries of her once stable life dissolving rapidly. As the days passed, Sarah's meetings with Jack and Mark became more frequent. She balanced her secret life with her mundane daily routine, becoming adept at hiding her indiscretions from Tom. Her phone was always close, her heart racing every time it buzzed with a message from either man. She was walking a dangerous tightrope, the thrill of the affair intoxicating and all-consuming. Each encounter with Jack and Mark was a stolen moment of ecstasy, a brief escape from the confines of her marriage. Sarah reveled in the danger and excitement, even as a small part of her knew that this path could only lead to disaster. But for now, she was content to live in the moment, savoring every forbidden touch and whispered promise. Sarah's life began to fray at the edges as the weight of her double life took its toll. Her once immaculate work performance started to suffer, her mind constantly drifting to thoughts of Jack and Mark. Deadlines slipped, and her usually sharp focus dulled. At home, she became more irritable and short-tempered, the constant stress of maintaining her secrets causing tension between her and Tom. He noticed her mood swings and the way she seemed perpetually distracted, but she brushed off his concerns with weak excuses. Lisa, the friend who had invited her to the fateful party, started to notice Sarah's odd behavior. They met for lunch, and Lisa couldn't hide her worry. "Sarah, is everything okay? You seem different lately," Lisa probed gently, her eyes full of concern. Sarah forced a smile, deflecting the truth with practiced ease. "I'm just stressed with work, Lisa. You know how it is." But inside, a pang of guilt gnawed at her. Lisa's concern only added to the growing weight of her deceit. The secret meetings with Jack and Mark continued, each encounter more reckless and thrilling than the last. One evening, as they lay entwined in a hotel room, Jack and Mark suggested something that made Sarah's heart race with a mix of fear and excitement: a threesome. The idea both terrified and enticed her. She hesitated, but the allure of their combined attention and the intoxicating freedom of their secret life was too powerful to resist. She agreed, her reservations drowned out by the thrill. The encounter was intense, an experience unlike anything Sarah had ever felt. The liberating sensation of their touch, the electric connection between the three of them, left her breathless and sated. But as she lay there in the aftermath, a creeping sense of danger began to overshadow the euphoria. She was in too deep, and the stakes were getting higher. Her fears were soon realized when she started receiving anonymous messages. The first one appeared in her inbox late at night, a simple but chilling note. "I know what you've been doing." Panic gripped her, her mind racing with the potential fallout. Who could know? Was it someone from work? A neighbor? The paranoia set in, but despite the threats, she couldn't resist the pull of Jack and Mark. Their allure was too strong, and she became even more reckless, taking greater risks to meet them. The strain of her lies began to unravel her carefully constructed facade. Tom grew more suspicious of her erratic behavior, her unexplained absences, and the strain in their relationship. One evening, he confronted her, his voice edged with frustration. "Sarah, where have you been? You come home late, and you're not yourself anymore. What's going on?" Her heart pounded, but she managed to deflect his concerns with another lie. "It's just work, Tom. The pressure is getting to me. I'll try to do better." But she knew the walls were closing in. The facade was crumbling, and the life she had known was slipping through her fingers. Despite the mounting risks and the threatening messages, Sarah couldn't bring herself to end the affair. The thrill, the danger, the sense of being truly alive, it was all too intoxicating. She was caught in a web of desire and deceit, each step drawing her further into the abyss. The evening was quiet, with Tom still at work and Sarah finally having a moment to herself. She was sipping wine on the couch when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. With a slight frown, she opened the message and felt her blood run cold. The message contained a video attachment, and as she watched, her heart sank. The footage showed her most intimate moments with Jack and Mark, filmed without her knowledge. She was horrified. The anonymous sender's message was clear. Pay a substantial amount of money, or the video would be sent to Tom and her colleagues. Panic set in, gripping her chest like a vice. She felt trapped and desperate, the walls of her secret life closing in around her. The next day, she arranged to meet Jack and Mark. Confronting them about the video, she saw their expressions shift from surprise to denial. They both swore they had no involvement in the filming. Yet, something about their reassurances felt off, a nagging suspicion that they were not being entirely truthful. Feeling the weight of the threat looming over her, Sarah began to gather money to pay the blackmailer. She sold personal belongings and borrowed money from friends under false pretenses, each lie adding to the crushing burden of her deceit. Her desperation grew, the fear of destroying her marriage and reputation driving her to increasingly reckless actions. Lisa, ever perceptive, noticed Sarah's increasing distress. One afternoon, she cornered Sarah, demanding to know the truth. Overwhelmed and feeling isolated, Sarah finally broke down, confessing everything. The affairs, the video, the blackmail. Lisa listened in stunned silence before offering a solution. They should go to the police. Sarah was reluctant. The thought of the scandal, the potential legal repercussions, it was too much to bear. She begged Lisa for another solution, but Lisa was insistent. The police were the only way to stop the blackmailer. As the blackmail demands escalated, Sarah's paranoia and anxiety grew. She became increasingly isolated, her health deteriorating under the constant stress. She felt as though she was being watched at every turn, the pressure mounting with each passing day. Her world was unraveling, and there seemed to be no escape from the nightmare she had created. Days turned into a blur of fear and desperation. Each interaction with Tom was a painful reminder of what she stood to lose. Her secret meetings with Jack and Mark now tainted by the looming threat, the thrill replaced with a constant undercurrent of dread. Her once vibrant life had become a prison, each step a reminder of the precipice she was teetering on. And yet, through the haze of despair, Sarah knew she had to find a way out. But as she spiraled deeper into the web of blackmail and deceit, the path to redemption seemed increasingly out of reach. Sarah paced back and forth in her small kitchen, her mind racing. She knew she had to confront the blackmailer directly. She couldn't involve Tom or the authorities, not yet. The risk of her secret life being exposed was too great. After days of agonizing over her decision, she finally steeled herself to arrange a meeting. The secluded location she chose was an old park on the outskirts of town, shrouded in shadows and secrecy. When the day arrived, Sarah's nerves were frayed to the breaking point. She arrived early, her eyes scanning the dark corners and hidden paths of the park. The sound of footsteps approached, and she turned to see Mike, a colleague she had never considered a threat, walking towards her. Her heart sank as realization hit her like a tidal wave. "Mike, you're the one doing this?" she stammered, disbelief evident in her voice. He smirked, his eyes glinting with a mix of satisfaction and malice. "Surprised, Sarah? I've been watching you for years, waiting for the perfect moment. That night at the party was my chance." Sarah felt a cold chill run down her spine. "Why, Mike, why would you do this?" "Because I've wanted you for so long, Sarah. And when I saw what you were doing with Jack and Mark, I knew I could use it to get what I wanted. You'll pay me a large sum, or I'll destroy your life. It's simple." Cornered and desperate, Sarah reluctantly agreed to pay Mike, hoping this would be the end of her nightmare. She gathered the money, every penny a reminder of her dwindling options and shattered trust. Handing over the cash felt like signing away a part of her soul, but she clung to the hope that this would finally put an end to the blackmail. But it didn't. Mike continued to extort her, his demands growing bolder and more frequent. Her life became a waking nightmare, the constant fear and anxiety eroding her sanity. She realized that complying with his demands would never end the blackmail, it would only deepen her misery. Lisa, ever vigilant, noticed the worsening state of Sarah's distress. One evening, Sarah broke down completely, spilling the full story to Lisa. Seeing her friend in such torment, Lisa insisted they go to the police. Sarah, exhausted and unable to withstand the pressure any longer, finally agreed. The police set up a sting operation to catch Mike in the act. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to meet Mike once again, this time wired and ready to bring him down. The plan was simple but fraught with risk. She would hand over the money while the police recorded everything, ready to swoop in once they had the evidence they needed. As she stood in the park, waiting for Mike to appear, fear gripped her. The darkened surroundings seemed to close in on her, each shadow a potential threat. But she was resolute. This had to end tonight. Mike arrived, his smug confidence infuriating. "Got my money?" he sneered. Sarah handed him the envelope, her hands trembling. As Mike began to count the money, the police moved in, their presence swift and overwhelming. Mike was caught off guard, his expression shifting from arrogance to panic in an instant. "Sarah, what have you done?" he yelled as the police cuffed him. But Sarah felt no sympathy. As Mike was led away, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The nightmare was over, but the damage to her life was profound and irreparable. She stood alone in the park, the consequences of her choices stretching out before her like a dark, endless road. The sting operation had been a success. Mike was arrested, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Yet, even as Sarah breathed a sigh of relief, she knew the worst was far from over. The video of her affairs had already been leaked to a few people, and it wasn't long before rumors began to spread at her workplace. The whispers followed her through the halls, the sidelong glances of her colleagues cutting deeper than any words. She felt humiliated and ostracized, the weight of her shame growing heavier each day. Her once friendly interactions with coworkers turned cold and distant. The isolation was suffocating, her office becoming a hostile environment she dreaded entering each morning. The situation escalated when Tom received an anonymous email with the video. The devastating impact was immediate. He confronted Sarah, his face a mask of fury and pain. "What is this, Sarah?" he demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. "How could you do this to us?" Sarah, broken and remorseful, confessed everything. She told him about her loneliness, her desperation, the illicit encounters with Jack and Mark, and the blackmail that followed. Each word felt like a dagger, twisting deeper into the wounds she had inflicted. Tom's face turned ashen as he absorbed the magnitude of her betrayal. Unable to cope with the reality, he left the house, saying he needed time to think. Sarah was left alone, staring at the wreckage of her life. The silence that followed his departure was deafening, the emptiness of the house amplifying her despair. Despite the chaos, Lisa remained a steadfast support. She encouraged Sarah to seek counseling and legal advice, providing a small beacon of hope in her darkest hours. Sarah took the first tentative steps to protect herself legally and emotionally, but the damage to her marriage seemed irreparable. The trust that once formed the foundation of her relationship with Tom was shattered, and she couldn't see a way to rebuild it. The fallout at work continued to intensify. Her boss called her into his office, his expression grave. "Sarah, the scandal has reached higher management. We need to place you on indefinite leave while we investigate the situation." The words hit her like a physical blow, the reality of her professional life unraveling before her eyes. Isolated and despondent, Sarah contemplated her future. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her, each decision leading to this moment of utter collapse. She sat in her now quiet home, surrounded by the echoes of her choices, questioning her ability to rebuild her life from the ashes. The vibrant, thrilling affair that had once filled her with excitement now seemed like a cruel mirage. The passion and liberation she had sought had turned into a nightmare, leaving her with nothing but regret and despair. Sarah's life had unraveled completely, the path to redemption obscured by the shadows of her past. The days passed in a haze, each one blending into the next. The morning Tom returned home, his demeanor was icy and distant. Sarah's heart pounded as he spoke the words she had been dreading. "I can't forgive you, Sarah. I'm filing for divorce." Desperation clawed at her insides as she begged him to reconsider. Tears streamed down her face, but Tom remained resolute. He moved out, leaving Sarah to face the crushing reality of their separation. The silence of the empty house echoed her despair. News of Sarah's scandal spread beyond her workplace, reaching her family and friends. The phone calls and messages came in waves, each one filled with judgment and criticism. Her parents, once her pillars of support, cut off contact, their shame and disappointment palpable. Friends turned their backs, and Sarah's world grew smaller and darker. Jack and Mark, now aware of the fallout, distanced themselves. Their messages became infrequent and then stopped altogether. Sarah realized, with a bitter sting, that they had used her for their own pleasure. She was left feeling used, abandoned, and utterly alone. Her mental health deteriorated rapidly. The weight of guilt, shame, and the loss of her marriage pressed down on her, suffocating her spirit. She sought solace in therapy, hoping to find some semblance of stability. But each session only underscored the depth of her despair. The company completed its investigation and decided to terminate Sarah's employment. She faced financial ruin, the daunting task of finding new employment with a tarnished reputation looming over her. Each rejection letter felt like another nail in the coffin of her once promising career. Lisa, despite her initial support, began to distance herself. The constant drama and negativity surrounding Sarah's life became too much to handle. Their once close friendship faded, leaving Sarah further isolated. Alone in her misery, Sarah's thoughts turned dark. She contemplated drastic measures to escape her situation, feeling that her life had reached an irreparable low. She started to plan her next steps, teetering on the edge of desperation. In a final attempt to find closure, Sarah wrote Tom a heartfelt letter. She poured out her soul, explaining her actions and expressing her deep regret. She hoped for some form of reconciliation, or at the very least, an end to the unbearable tension between them. Tom received the letter but remained unmoved. He finalized the divorce proceedings, leaving Sarah with a modest settlement but no emotional closure. The finality of the divorce hit her hard, a painful reminder of the life she had destroyed. Unable to bear the memories that haunted every corner of her house, Sarah sold it. She moved to a small apartment, trying to start anew but constantly haunted by her past. Each room in the new place was a stark reminder of her loneliness and the mistakes that had led her here. Her therapist encouraged her to join a support group for people who had experienced similar betrayals and scandals. Reluctantly, Sarah attended her first meeting, feeling vulnerable and exposed. The stories of others provided a small comfort, a reminder that she was not alone in her suffering. But the road to recovery was long and uncertain. Sarah's life had unraveled completely, leaving her to navigate a future filled with shadows and regrets. The vibrant, thrilling affair that had once seemed like an escape had turned into a nightmare, leaving her with nothing but pain and a desperate hope for redemption. Sarah entered the support group meeting with trepidation, her heart heavy with the burden of her past. The room was filled with people who, like her, had faced their own scandals and betrayals. As the sessions progressed, Sarah began to share her story, finding solace in the empathy and understanding of others. The community provided a small but significant comfort, a reminder that she was not alone in her suffering. Despite this, Sarah's depression deepened. The support group, while helpful, couldn't fully dispel the darkness that clung to her. She struggled to find meaning and purpose in her life, feeling that her actions had irreversibly damaged her future. The sense of hopelessness was suffocating. Then, one day, she received a job offer from a small company willing to overlook her past. Grateful for the opportunity, Sarah accepted the position. The job offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild her professional reputation. She threw herself into her work, determined to prove herself and regain some semblance of respect. But the shadow of her scandalous history loomed large, never far from her mind. Sarah's relationship with her parents remained strained. After much persuasion, they reluctantly agreed to meet her for dinner. The encounter was tense and uncomfortable, filled with awkward silences and unspoken recriminations. It was a painful reminder of the rift her actions had caused. Her therapist suggested focusing on small victories and personal growth. Sarah began setting small goals, trying to regain a sense of control over her life. Slowly, she started to reconnect with old hobbies and interests, seeking joy in the things she used to love. It was a slow process, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope. One day, Sarah received an unexpected call from Tom. He expressed a desire to meet and talk, leaving Sarah anxious and uncertain about his intentions. They met in a quiet cafe, the air thick with unspoken tension. Tom revealed that he had been seeing a therapist and wanted to try to understand what had happened between them. He didn't promise reconciliation but offered a chance for open dialogue. Their conversations were difficult but cathartic. They began to explore the issues that had led to their estrangement, both recognizing their faults. The process was fraught with setbacks, but Sarah started to believe in the possibility of a future where she could move past her mistakes. As the divorce was finalized, Sarah and Tom parted on better terms than before. There was no promise of a renewed relationship, but there was a sense of mutual respect and understanding. It was a small step towards healing. Sarah continued to attend her support group, finding strength in the stories of others. She began to see herself not just as a victim of her circumstances but as someone capable of rebuilding her life. The support group provided a beacon of hope, guiding her through the darkest moments. Despite the ongoing challenges, Sarah started to see a future where she could find happiness again. She made peace with her past, acknowledging her mistakes and vowing to learn from them. The journey towards self-forgiveness was far from over, but she was on the right path. Standing on the threshold of a new chapter, Sarah's life was forever changed by her choices. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of hope. The past would always be a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She was ready to embrace whatever the future held, armed with the lessons she had learned and the strength she had